Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with the mighty Jingles, and today we're giving you a preview of the latest operation to hit World of Warships. It was on the test server over the last weekend, and it's probably going to be hitting the live server relatively soon. This is Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of Dunkirk. Dunkirk is pretty much the entire theme of the next patch for World of Warships. It's not just the operation. It comes with a swanky new Dunkirk themed port, which is what you're looking at right here. There's also a Dunkirk collection, but it's the actual PvE cooperative operation that we're going to be looking at in today's video, because it's one of those operations that, while I definitely like it, I think it's very good, it's not too hard, but if you don't know what to expect, you're probably going to fail horribly at it the first time you play, because it's very different to any of the other operations available in World of Warships. One thing that you don't have to worry about when you're playing Operation Dynamo is somebody in your team picking a ship that isn't really suited to playing that operation, because there are only two ships that you can play this operation with, and you get given them for free as soon as the operation begins. They're both Tier 5 destroyers. There's a British one, HMS Anthony, and a French one, the Cyclone. Despite the fact that these are both Tier 5 destroyers, they're actually very, very different ships, and for a number of reasons. The Cyclone can have a smokescreen, the Anthony can't. The Anthony can, however, have the, typically associated with cruisers, defensive fire anti-aircraft cooldown. The Cyclone has 130mm guns, but they have a kind of slow muzzle velocity and a long reload, whereas the Anthony has lots of 120mm guns that have very, very good muzzle velocity, and they fire twice as quickly. Overall, I do think that the Anthony is a better ship to play in this scenario, but it doesn't have a smokescreen, so you're going to need some people in the Cyclone as well. Once you've decided which of these ships you're going to play, you're probably going to get very excited to note that each of the ships has a 15-point captain assigned to it. Now, this is where you really do need to stop and pay attention, because I'm going to show you exactly where to spend the skill points on these captains if you plan on completing this operation with 5 stars. At Tier 1, preventative maintenance. I always value preventative maintenance in a destroyer above priority target, because I just assume that if I've been spotted and I'm in a destroyer, everybody who can shoot at me is going to be shooting at me anyway. And when you start getting shot at in a destroyer, your engine has a nasty habit of getting knocked out. Preventative maintenance reduces the chance that your engine is going to be disabled when you get hit. There is a bit of room for argument over the skills that you might want to pick at Tier 2, but I'm going to recommend Jack of all trades for 5% off the reload time of your consumables and last stand, so that when your engine does inevitably get hit, you can keep moving and turning the ship anyway. Those would definitely be my recommendations if you're planning on doing this operation in the British destroyer HMS Anthony. If you're planning on taking the French destroyer, the Cyclone, out, then you might want to consider Smokescreen Expert, because the Cyclone has a smokescreen and it is going to be useful. And possibly also Expert Marksman, because the Cyclone's 130mm guns don't turn as quickly as the 120mm guns on the Anthony. At Tier 3, regardless of which of these two ships you intend on playing, you will pick the following 2 skills. Superintendent for an extra charge on all of your consumables, you are going to need it, and Basic Firing Training. Not just because it buffs the reload of your main battery guns by 10%, but more importantly, it gives you an extra 20% to the damage per second of your anti-aircraft guns. That should leave you with exactly 4 points left for your final Tier 4 skill, and it's not going to be Concealment Expert. You're going to spend your last 4 points on Advanced Firing Training. And again, it's not because it extends the range of your main battery guns by 10%, although that's nice, but it's because it extends the range of your anti-aircraft guns by 20%. Jingles, we appear to be setting up a pair of Tier 5 destroyers as anti-aircraft fortresses. What's going on? Yep, do not adjust your sets, that's exactly what we're doing. Bearing that in mind, you might be asking yourself, well, why not take manual fire control for anti-aircraft armament? And that is an excellent question, but manual fire control for anti-aircraft armament only affects anti-aircraft guns that are larger in caliber than 85mm. Otherwise, it's completely useless, and it's completely useless on these 2 destroyers. And once you've set your 2 captains up correctly, you're going to do exactly the same with the ships and the flags. Anything that buffs the range, survivability, or damage output of your anti-aircraft guns is what you're going to fit to both of these 2 Tier 5 destroyers. And once you've done all that, we're ready to hit the battle button. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Dunkirk 1940. Ashore, on that beach, are 20,000 soldiers of the British Expeditionary Force, and they have nowhere to go but into the sea. They are completely surrounded by the German army. The Royal Navy does not have enough ships to evacuate them all, and so the call went out across Britain for anybody with a boat that could make it to Dunkirk to go to Dunkirk and pick up some soldiers and bring them home to England. Hermann Goering had boasted to Hitler that the Luftwaffe alone would be entirely capable of destroying the British army encircled at Dunkirk. Later on, he would tell Hitler that the Luftwaffe alone was entirely capable of smashing the Royal Air Force and bringing Britain to its knees from air assault alone. And even later still, he would boast to Hitler that the Luftwaffe alone was entirely capable of resupplying and provisioning the encircled 6th Army at Stalingrad. If being wrong was a sport, Goering could have represented Germany at the Olympics. Anyway, this is Operation Dynamo. That white circle ahead is the embarkation circle. Both yourself and all of these small pleasure boats and river steamers that we're escorting in there can pick up soldiers from the beach, providing they come to a halt inside that white circle. At the moment, we're shooting down fighter aircraft. Look at the... Yeah, that is a lot of defensive AA. Despite the buffs to the Cyclone, by the way, I've managed to raise its anti-aircraft rating to a, wait for it, value of 6. Luckily, the aircraft in this mission do not have a lot of health. So, what those fighter aircraft are actually doing is spotting you for German artillery ashore. And they're the major threat in the initial phase of the operation. Well, that and the minefield. Did I mention the minefield? I didn't mention the minefield. You might be looking at the map and thinking, what are those big red areas? Don't sail into the big red areas. Or you will hit a mine, and it will cause you lots and lots and lots of problems. French destroyers at this point, as you can see one of us has already done, should be laying a smoke screen here, so that when those spotter aircraft come back, the troop transports are not going to be vulnerable to artillery fire from ashore. But here comes the major threat. Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, and they are going to be followed by HE-111s that are going to drop torpedoes. This is why you need to spec both of these destroyers, whether you take the French one or the British one, for maximum possible anti-aircraft fire. Because one of the secondary objectives in this operation is to shoot down 8 squadrons, not 8 squadrons of fighter aircraft. And one of the other secondary objectives is to shoot down a combined total of 80 dive and torpedo bombers. And we want to complete this operation with 5 stars. The primary objective, in order to successfully complete the operation with no stars, is simply to get 3,000 troops back to Britain. Now, you can gain a star by completing another secondary objective, which is to get 5,000 troops or more back to Britain. To do that, you're probably going to want to embark some of the troops yourself. However, bear in mind, every time your destroyer takes a hit, some of those troops are going to be killed. The aircraft, mines and shore artillery are not the only threat, however. While the German Navy didn't have much of a presence at Dunkirk, here in Operation Dynamo in World of Warships, you are going to be confronted with swarms of these things, Schnellboots, or as the British called them, E-boats. The French destroyer, the Cyclone, is not particularly good at dealing with these E-boats because they're tiny and they're very, very fast-moving targets. The Cyclone's guns have a slow reload and low muzzle velocity, making it very, very difficult to lead these tiny little targets. The Anthony, by contrast, is much, much better at dealing with them. Its guns have twice the rate of fire of the Cyclone, and they also have more than 100 meters per second better muzzle velocity. So if you're doing this operation in the British destroyer HMS Anthony, you should definitely be prioritising the E-boats wherever possible. You're just so much better than the French destroyer at actually hitting these little buggers. They don't require a lot of hits to sink, they don't have a huge amount of health, and they don't shoot back at you. In real life, they were only armed with 20 and 37mm guns. As far as their guns were concerned, they were no real threat to a destroyer, but it's the torpedoes that they fire that are a big threat to the transports that you're escorting. And yes, there is yet another secondary mission to sink 25 of these E-boats, so there's going to be a lot more of them showing up at some point. And here comes some more spotter aircraft, which means we're about to come under fire from shore artillery once again. And yep, sure enough, I've been hit by shore artillery once again. It is remarkably accurate, and I keep losing soldiers. poor buggers are crammed to the gunwales on board every flat surface of my ship. Every time I take a hit, some of those soldiers are going to die. It's been estimated that 933 ships took part in the evacuation of Dunkirk, although the true number will never really be known because no tally was taken of the hordes of little boats who, just on their own initiative, sailed across the English Channel, picked up half a dozen soldiers, and then sailed all the way back again. It wasn't just a Royal Navy effort. Ships of France, Belgium, Holland and Norway took part in the operation alongside the ships of the Royal Navy. But it was a costly operation for the naval and merchant forces present. Of the estimated 933 ships that took part, 236 were sunk, 61 were put out of action. The Royal Navy lost 6 destroyers and 9 larger vessels. Numerous more were damaged. The French Navy lost 3 destroyers. But between them, they managed to evacuate 338,000 British and French troops from the beaches. As well as the 68,000 men who were left behind, the British Army was also forced to abandon 2,472 guns, 63,879 vehicles, and 20,548 motorcycles. No matter which way you look at it, Dunkirk was a disaster, and it couldn't have come at a worse time for Churchill, who'd only been Prime Minister for 16 days when the evacuation began. But it could have been, and it should have been, so much worse. If the panzers hadn't halted short of the beaches to let the Luftwaffe do the dirty work, the British Army would have been lost. If the little ships hadn't answered the call in the nation's hour of need, the British Army would have been lost. If the Royal Navy hadn't stepped up and taken fearful losses evacuating the soldiers from the beaches, the British Army would have been lost. But the Royal Navy has always had something of a tradition of answering the call when the army needed it. And that tradition would continue throughout the course of World War II. First in Dunkirk, then in Greece, then in Crete. There's actually quite a good quote from Admiral Cunningham, who was the admiral in charge of the evacuation of Crete. When 16,800 British and Commonwealth troops were successfully evacuated at great cost to the Royal Navy, and when told that the evacuations could not continue because it would cost too many ships, he replied, "It takes the Navy 3 years to build a ship, it'll take 300 years to build a new tradition. The evacuation will continue." A lot's been made about the Royal Air Force's contribution to the evacuation at Dunkirk, or rather the Royal Air Force's lack of a contribution to the evacuation at Dunkirk. After sitting on exposed beaches for days at a time, patiently waiting to be evacuated while under continual air attack, many British and French soldiers would shake their fists at the sky and ask, where the hell's the Royal Air Force? The Royal Air Force actually lost 145 aircraft defending those beaches. And the reason you didn't see any Royal Air Force aircraft over the beaches was because it's a bit bloody late to intercept dive bombers if they're already dropping their bombs on the targets. This was a fact that was missed by most of the soldiers present on the beaches at the time, although it is understandable. The Royal Air Force was conducting fighter sweeps well inland of the beaches in order to intercept the Luftwaffe before they got within bombing range of the troops. Aircraft losses overall from the 10th of May 1940 until the fall of France were 959 for the British and 1,279 for the Germans. The Royal Air Force did their part. Anyway, how's the operation going? Well, we're nearly there, although there are more air attacks coming in, and now this is the tricky part, because there's a channel that's been swept through the minefields. And it's a very, very narrow channel, which means you can't do an awful lot of manoeuvring in here, or you will run into the minefield. And one thing that you do like to do in a destroyer, if there are torpedoes being fired at you, is manoeuvre. So, you can see that there's an air attack forming over to the east, and there's a smoke screen already being laid by one of the other French destroyers. I'm busy scanning the horizon because I know that we're going to come under attack from E-boats. And it's not just those guys, there are the HE-111s. Does anybody else find it remarkable that they've actually modelled HE-111s and Ju-87s, and you're never going to see them except in this operation? It really is impressive, the amount of effort that they've gone to make this thing a success. Anyway, come on, where are you? I'm almost clear of the swept channel in the minefield and back into the open seas of the channel. There's an E-boat attack mustering down in that direction, but I know there's going to be another one coming from up ahead before we finally get back to England. I'm well ahead of the rest of the force. So I'm going to stop and lay a smoke screen up here just to cover the mouth of the swept channel in the minefield, so that when those E-boats do appear, they're not going to see any targets other than me. Ooh, maybe this isn't such a good idea after all. You can see there's a ship been sunk over there, and those are men in the water. You see that white circle? If you were suicidal, you could sail over there and rescue them. That's one of our destroyers that's been sunk over there, taking one for the team, and all of the troops that he was evacuating are now furiously paddling in the water, hoping to be rescued, but, well, there's no way anybody's going to sail all the way back down there. They're going to be cut off from the rest of the convoy, a sit and duck for the next air attack that comes in, and any more E-boats that arrive as well. So unfortunately, those guys are on their own. It's actually quite morbid, you know. I mean, I know we're only talking about pixels here, but the fact that those pixels are representing men drowning. And here come the E-boats. Okay. I think I might have slightly mistimed my smoke screen. No, actually no. The majority of the transports are still hidden by the smoke screen, which means that it's down to the destroyers to basically take one for the team here and get in there. I mean, if we get sunk, it's not such a big issue. We just have to make sure that the transports make it back. And in fact, one of the bonus objectives is to make sure at least 6 transports make it back, and we just lost 1, and that's more men in the water. We now have 9 transports remaining. We can afford to lose, well, we prefer not to lose any, but we can afford to lose another 3. And here comes the next air attack. Although it's fighters. Ah, right, this is the point where if you're in HMS Anthony, this is where you use your defensive fire cooldown. What are you talking about, Jingles? Why would you waste the defensive fire cooldown on fighter aircraft? They can't harm your ships. And you're out of range of the shore artillery back in France. Well, yeah, but the Royal Air Force are about to send fighter aircraft over. There they are. They're getting engaged in a dogfight with those Bf-109s. Unfortunately, it's a fair fight, so you need to make it as unfair a fight as possible and help shooting down as many of those fighter aircraft as you possibly can, not just because one of your secondary objectives is to shoot down 8 German fighter squadrons, but because at the moment we've only shot down 48 of the 80 required dive and torpedo bombers, and more of them are coming in. The fact that we've shot down 48 of 80 would suggest that a hell of a lot more are about to come in. And we're going to need those fighters to get that secondary objective complete. Every aircraft that the Royal Air Force Hurricanes and Spitfires shoot down is added to your total. So you have to keep those fighters in the air, if at all possible. Also, it doesn't really matter if you lose destroyers. I've seen people deliberately taking torpedo hits and losing their own ship just to ensure that those transports get home. That's what we're here for, after all. If you have to lose a destroyer to save the lives of the soldiers, then, well, destroyers are expendable. That's sad but true fact. It's actually going pretty well here. More E-boats coming in. But we're within sight of completing another 2 bonus objectives, sink 25 E-boats, and with those fighters harrying the Ju-87s, ah crap, they've hit me anyway. And that unfortunately has killed more soldiers clinging onto the upper deck of my destroyer, which is kind of ironic because I just pulled a whole bunch of them out of the sea when that pleasure cruiser went down after taking a couple of torpedoes from the earlier E-boat attack. But we're nearly there. We just have to weather the storm for a few more minutes. I mean, there are the white cliffs of Dover. I mean, we can see home from here. We've just got to finish off this E-boat attack, and there's going to be another air attack, which we should be able to deal with because we've managed to keep the majority of those Hurricanes and Spitfires alive. Another E-boat down. Come on, boys. Let's get in there. Torpedo attack coming in off the port beam. Our smoke screen isn't quite ready. Another torpedo attack coming in from the starboard beam and more E-boats. And at this point, victory is so close we can taste it. This team has done remarkably well. I really wish I'd been in HMS Anthony at this point, because it's just so much better at dealing with the E-boats. Much more rapid firing guns. It only takes 2 hits to take one of these things out. and the muzzle velocity is like 850 meters per second compared to about 735 meters per second for the Cyclone's slower firing 130mm guns. The Anthony really does rip these E-boats apart. We've already completed the secondary objective to sink 25 E-boats. We've completed the secondary objective to shoot down 8 squadrons of fighters. We're within spitting distance of completing the bonus objective to shoot down 80 dive and torpedo bombers. We're so close. Fresh air attack forming to starboard. There's more of them coming in. Come on, boys, give them hell. Destroyer at the rear there, just furiously dodging torpedoes, and another fresh attack coming in. Sorry about this, dude, but I need to get over there. The range of our anti-aircraft guns is very limited. I don't think you can extend it to much further than 1.7 or possibly 2.1 kilometers, but it's not a lot. That guy managed to get his torpedoes away, and unfortunately, one of the British destroyers has been sunk. And once again, it's very sobering because that white circle indicates men who are drowning. Above the circle, you can see the number that indicates how many men are available to be rescued. And that number keeps going down as men drown. But while I want to go back there and pick up survivors, it would be suicide. There's a fresh E-boat attack coming in, and in order to rescue those survivors, you have to get inside that white circle and come to a stop. And I have the lives of the men that I've already rescued to think about. I have 646 troops on board this destroyer, and I cannot afford to take another torpedo hit. If I do, that's 646 men dead. But these E-boats are getting awfully close, and there are a lot more men's lives at risk on board these small ships. Unfortunately, the small ships are kind of in the way of my guns and torpedoes, so I'm desperately trying not to inflict any damage on the ships of the convoy while I get the torpedoes away and then bring the guns to bear. And I've got him, but he's managed to get his torpedoes away. Now we've lost another transport. That's another 500 men in the water, but I kind of have other things to worry about at this precise moment in time. Bingo, got him. Swing the ship around. Come on, guys, help me out. There's only one left. Guns are almost reloaded, but yep, somebody else took him out. And that, with 3,000 troops successfully evacuated, is mission complete. Now, you don't have to worry about the bonus objective to rescue 5,000 troops. Providing you get this far, then the total number of troops still surviving on board any ships that have not yet been sunk do get added to your team's total. And that, in this case at least, was enough to push us over the 5,000 troops successfully evacuated mark, which is yet another bonus objective, which means we've done it with 5 stars. It's a very enjoyable operation. And it's not really that difficult, providing you set your ship up correctly before you start and you know what to expect. And if you've watched this video, you already know how to set your ship up correctly, and you pretty much know what to expect. As far as the rewards are concerned, there are no real surprises here. They're pretty much standard, as per the other operations, but the 4-point reward is the one that most people are going to be interested in, because it's a 10-point French captain. I've really enjoyed playing Operation Dynamo on the test server. I don't know when it's going to be going live, when the patch is going to be coming out, but the test server was taken down at 3 o'clock Central European Standard Time yesterday, which would suggest that the patch is imminent, so you're probably not going to have to wait too long in order to be able to have a go yourself. And with the release of the Dunkirk movie happening later this month, it makes sense for Wargaming to get this thing pushed out as soon as possible so they can capitalise on the popularity of the movie. Speaking of which, it's really put me in the right frame of mind to go and see the movie too. Anyway, that's pretty much it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you're looking forward to this operation hitting the live servers as much as I am, because I am going to be kicking the arse out of this and farming as much XP and credits out of it as I possibly can. I've really enjoyed playing these operations in World of Warships overall. This one may very well be my new favourite, although I do still have a bit of a soft spot for Operation Raptor Rescue. I really like that one as well. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.